Hello everyone, it has been a long time that I've made any videos, and especially FaceTime videos. I've been making some animations, but it was not good either. So I want to make a little bit of low effort content today, and it is going to be about whether or not Sanskrit is an artificial language. So why Sanskrit is really constructive. It feels constructive. Someone has actually made the language by sitting on a desk. Why does it seem like it? And many people actually push the narrative that Sanskrit is something like Esperanto, which was a man-made language. And I think by saying that, people are doing a lot of disservice to the literature that they have actually got in Sanskrit. So I will explain why that is the case, why it is really mathematical, the grammar, and why it sounds, not really sounds, but why it looks like as if it is constructed and it is a really systematical. The first thing that I'm going to say is the Sanskrit grammar is mathematical, but I do not think that it is a really regular like Esperanto, because if you look at Esperanto, then the grammar is a really regular, and Sanskrit is not like that. So the first thing is that. Now let me take you over 2000 years ago, before Panini, right? So let us consider a tribal society, right? A society in which people actually spoke some language, but they didn't have any kind of grammar, because who got time for that? Because they have to hunt and eat, right? So that is the thing that they have to do. So they didn't have any grammar, but they had the language. Now the language got better and better. And after that, some grammarians were there before Panini. I'm talking about before Panini here. So grammarians were there. Now those grammarians made some rules kind of thing. Not made some rules, but the rules were already in the verbal communication. They just wrote it down, or like the writing system was not there maybe, but they were basically established as rules at that particular time. So those were there. But the thing is that there was a problem. The problem was when Rig Veda was actually written, the Sanskrit was like type A. And after that, when the time for Atharva Veda actually came, the type of Sanskrit was type D. The Sanskrit connotations and a lot of things actually changed a lot, starting from Rig Veda to Atharva Veda. So there was a lot of differences between those two texts as well, just a few hundred years apart maybe, right? Of course, the parts of it is going to be like, is yet to be added, those kind of things. I am not going to go to the history, but of course, Rig Veda is the first one and Atharva Veda is the last one, even temporally, right? So that is the thing. Now, the Acharyas, not only Panini, but the Acharyas before Panini, they also thought that this is not going right, because if we didn't standardize this language, this is going to be the end, right? So everyone spoke that language, that is basically verbal Sanskrit, that you can say it is Vedic Sanskrit or something like that, it is Chandas or whatever. People spoke that. People say that it is not spoken, but that is what people spoke. Now, after that, what happened is that when Panini actually came here, he had to do something, right? Not only him, but so many people actually did. Many grammarians were there. Now, Panini, what he actually did is basically reverse engineered the whole Sanskrit language. Now, a language is there, which is messed up, basically. It has a lot of forms. There is going to be some grammatical rules, and the things were not as bad in English at that time. There were some rules and they were followed pretty good, but there were a lot of irregularities, and it was really difficult to standardize it. So a kind of reverse engineering was actually done, assuming that there is a meta language that can produce the whole language back. So let us consider in a language of maybe a student or some mathematical guy, right? Let us consider there's a meta language M, which can produce a whole verbal, a written standard for an existing language that was spoken at that particular time. Now, this reverse engineering that Panini did at that particular time was not perfect, right? But that was it, right? There is going to be some Rudha thing. The Rudha is basically something like, let us consider what this particular object is called. It is called something, right? So why it is called? We do not know any answer to this, because our grandfathers were actually telling that object that particular name. So that is called Rudha or Rudhi or whatever. So those kind of things were there a lot, and some of them were standardized as well in the meta language of Panini, but many of them was not. And after that, whatever was produced was in the standard of Panini. It was basically setting a standard after the reverse engineering was actually done. There were a lot of words that he had to force reverse engineer. For example, let us consider a very simple example like pashyati. Like drish is the dhatu and pashyati is going to be there. So you have to reverse engineer. You have to make a new rule for that, right? So drish is going to be pash. That particular rule has to be added, because in the common man's world, pashyati was actually said, and the dhatu is only drish. So pashyati drish, it does not make sense. Let us add a rule that satisfies the language. So those kind of things were done. And because that is really needed as well. Now, because if the language is really, really different, then it is not going to make any sense, right? So it is such that the the engineer was so good, but not perfect, that the language was fully standardized, and it basically stopped changing, to be honest, because the same Sanskrit, if I speak the same Sanskrit now, people used to speak the same Sanskrit at the time of Panini and after that, and it basically became the language standard, and it has not changed much. Maybe some of the amendments were there, like amendments in the Constitution, that is there, but that is in the form of interpretations of whatever Panini had actually said in that way. And maybe some rules were there, but yeah, those kind of things was there. So basically, it sounds so mathematically accurate. Is it was deliberate. It was a deliberate attempt to do that, right? Maybe the language was structured before as well, because there were previous grammarians, and we know from Panini that there were. So because of that, what we can actually see is now the most standardized mathematical scientific grammar we currently have in linguistics. Any language does not have that kind of grammar, because that was deliberate and that was actually needed, right? So that is the story of Sanskrit. It is the truth. It is not that someone actually sat down and then started writing Sanskrit from scratch. It is not so. Now, the verbal language that I was actually talking about, the Vedic Sanskrit or a verbal Sanskrit or whatever, pre-classical Sanskrit, that language actually was being converted into Pali. And being converted, I don't mean that someone actually was deliberately trying to convert it, but I mean that those languages were being converted temporarily into something like Pali, something like maybe any other Prakrit, Magadhi Prakrit, or Sauraseni Prakrit, or whatever. There are a lot of Prakrit languages, but it came directly from the verbal Sanskrit, because like it is just standardization. And after a verbal Sanskrit or a Vedic Sanskrit was actually standardized, it stopped changing, right? So all of the things stopped changing. But the people are actually retarded. Now, I do not mean in negative terms, I'm just joking, but people are actually retarded because they are not going to speak correctly, right? No one is going to speak correctly. Now, you can look at Gen Alpha slangs. They are not speaking English correctly. That is how language is going to evolve now. Now, after that, that is what happened. And after that, we actually got a lot of pretty good languages and then Nepali, Gujarati, Marathi, whatever, in Indian subcontinent, all of the languages were there. Maybe Dravidian is not the same thing, but yeah. Other languages were from verbal Sanskrit. That is how it developed. So if someone actually says that Sanskrit is an artificial language, then it is not correct. Yes, it is a reverse engineered. Reverse engineered. Sorry. Yes, that is how it was done. Also, well, I think this confusion is everywhere, to be honest, because many people actually think that Sanskrit was not even spoken. It was spoken, but like no one actually speaks in like the received pronunciation in English fully 100% compatible. There are going to be some mistakes, and like it is going to be academic language most of the times, and languages are going to be changing, but there has to be a language which does not change and is going to be standard for maybe math, science, poetry, those kind of stuff, so that any upcoming generation is actually going to understand that, and that language was Sanskrit. But now it is maybe it is not needed. Maybe English is the thing. I'm not sure. It is, of course, like a thing to debate, but that is what I think. Sanskrit is a beautiful language. I love it, but I do not know what to do with it in this economy.